Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Healing Through Storytelling webinar. Now, I just really want to tell you I'm quite excited because I'm putting this webinar together. I thought I would just be explaining the science, the neuroscience behind how it affects storytelling. But what I found was an absolutely magical process, which I'm excited to share with you. But one thing I also realized was that instead of giving you a little summary of what I'm going to speak into, I thought it was important for me to express why I'm doing this work and how I came to doing it. And the simple answer is, I think the world needs healing. There's so much pain collectively in the world, but also we're all experiencing some degree of pain, whether it's in the past, present, and certainly in the future in our mind at least. So how I came to do this work is I had my own trauma. And I'm a natural storyteller, but I never utilized storytelling as a tool for healing until I did. I created a tale, a fable around my own trauma. And what I found was something I didn't expect. And it took me out of the pain. The raw emotions absolutely was taken out of that picture because it was in the story. So I saw the story for what it was, and I didn't have to own it. And all I had to do was work on these raw emotions that had sort of triggered from that actual story. Now, quick disclaimer. I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a psychologist. And the images you're going to see, they are not TED Talk caliber, okay? What I'm wanting to do is to bring it down to layman's language so we can pretty much apply it to our own lives and our practices. Okay, so what is my backstory? I did a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies, and I have a degree in also a Bachelor's of Design in Visual Communications and Animation. So I also ran a graphic design studio for over 10 years. So I've been able to combine all those skills, understanding people, but also understanding in a commercial sense what people want to communicate, and also in terms of the storytelling, understand people to be able to draw out the emotions that may trigger them or emotions that need to be worked upon. So basically, that is my background. But all those qualifications don't make me a storyteller purely. I'm a storyteller because I have my own personal narrative and I have lived experiences that I want to share, that I want to express. So I asked you, how many of you have gone back to the past and embellished your painful stories? And how many of you have created future stories of pain? I'm a world builder, so I build stories in my head from the past, present, and future. So after what I've asked you, I suspect you all have that ability, that imagination to create stories, to be a world builder yourself. So with all the would'ves, could'ves, should'ves, we can use those and we can sort them out through hearing this talk, because my intention of this webinar is to help you understand the process that's going on in your mind and your body, and how you can harness that information to help you in your own healing journey. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Excuse my eyes. Move the images down so I can. Right. So the topics we're going to cover are the history and heritage of storytelling, how science and storytelling meet, and how story can influence the mind and body system. Now, we were going to speak about finding the healing in your own narrative and separating self from painful narratives. But having done all this, there is so much information. And this is the science of part of the presentation. And this part, finding the healing in your own narrative and separating self from painful narratives, I felt needed justice, needed the time. And I thought also, once you learn about this, you'll need to digest it. And then we can apply it to this. So my aim is to have a follow-up webinar where we can take this information and put it into this context. Right, so the history and heritage of storytelling. Now, this is a very quick overview. So storytelling dates way back, way back, and it predates writing. In fact, even the Egyptian hieroglyphics are in fact images, symbols, and pictures. And storytelling is a form of connection. Now, for me, the Zoom era is quite difficult because for me, storytelling is quite crucial with the eye-to-eye contact. There is something about the eye-to-eye contact that locks people in. So I'll do my best in Zoom. Now, there are a lot of ways to express storytelling, which of course is the oral and spoken word. Song, dance, reenactment, and art. And in the ancient of days, a lot of these elements supported the oral and spoken storytelling. Okay, so, beg your pardon, right. Storytelling is a very important part of survival because it was vital to pass life-saving information on. Like for the hunt and gather societies, it was used for education, how to hunt, how to watch out for predators, and also for the, in terms of gathering things, to know where to find water, what plants are safe to eat, what are poisonous, and where to find them. And in terms of the hunting side, that is entwined with the innate human fight and flight response. Now, it's also very important, storytelling is very important to preserve culture. Stories pass spiritual teachings. Like with Indigenous culture in Australia, you have your dreaming, your dream time. You have your history, the storytelling passes down history. And memories of tribes, family memories. And it's also etiquette, how to live, how to behave, what is socially acceptable. Now, the traditional storyteller was viewed as a healer, a spiritual guide, a leader or an elder, a cultural secret keeper, an entertainer, and a jester. So think through, how many of these do you identify with? Because then you're a storyteller. Right, there is another take on the history of storytelling. Okay. He ignored his mother's mantra of go and practice your violin, for he was furiously scribbling on his piece of papyrus. Yes, young Nero fancied himself as a great philosopher. That is, until he remembered his genius. And we all know that the ancient Romans believed that we're all born with a genius. No? Let me enlighten you. The ancient Romans believed that we had a genius rather than being a genius. And the genius will guide you throughout your life. So the idea was the genius will enter you, possess you, and inspire you to create, well, a work of genius. But if you did something crappy, it just meant that you ignored your genius. Okay, back to Nero. Nero wrote what he felt was his greatest philosophical manifesto. It would be a Pulitzer Prize winner, the best-selling parchment of the day. But then he remembered it was his genius's doing. He couldn't take the credit. Intolerable, thought Nero. So he burnt all his work. Now, when he did do something crappy, produce something crappy, he would say, "Oh my gods, what were you thinking, genius?" And as usual, Nero would divert the blame on somebody else, this being his genius. So Nero, go and practice your violin. Okay. Back to storytelling. Okay. There you go. Okay, so science, how science and storytelling meet. Okay, so basically you have memory storage in your brain where the memory retention. There's different quantities, of, if I can call it that. So basically, storytelling brings humanity to science. And listening to stories engage our brain. So if you don't connect with story, then it stays in your short-term memory. But before then, when a story is told, it goes into the iconic memory, because first you see patterns and then there's some sort of familiarity to it, and it only lasts for seconds. So this is pretty much the story formula. This is the story formula where, okay, so it's a once upon a time thing. So you know a story is about to begin. Then you got the hero's journey, and then you have happily ever after. And it's interesting because once you hear the word once upon a time, psychologically, it brings you to a place of safety, of childhood. So you actually get people's attention, and then you move on to the short-term memory. Now, beg your pardon. So here the short-term memory is where the information and the data is stored. So here is more about the plot. So at this stage, the listener is kind of interested, but not quite engaged. And it's not until you hit the point of the story where you start bringing out the emotion, when people start connecting with the character, when people start resonating with what you're saying, when people start to go into the story. So when this happens, there is a connection between you, the character, and the listener, because we all search for meaning. Once the story starts, we all search for a meaning. Okay, so how does this happen? Well, there's this thing called neurocoupling or mirroring neurons. And this is when the listener's brain synchronizes with the storyteller's brain. So mirroring neurons are activated when the listener connects with the story, and the listener, and the storyteller has actually made a connection with the person. And this is interesting. This works as I said, with the eye contact, but also the physicality of it. So the emotions of the storyteller, in fact, is where the listener starts to connect with. So they start to engage and they start to empathize with the storyteller, and they begin to actually feel what the storyteller is feeling. And this is called narrative transport, because the storyteller, all on the brain, there's a neural wiring is mapped around the brain with so many sensory regions. And what happens is the areas that are lit up in the storyteller's mind gets translated to the listener's mind. This is when they engage with emotions. Okay, so this part of the brain, the left side of the brain, this is the analytical side. So this is where facts are stored. Basically, the Broca's area is where the language is processed and the speech production. Then it goes over to the Wernicke area, and that's where the language comprehension is. Okay, so once we hit the right hemisphere, this is the part where it's the creative side. It's where the intuition is. But when someone is hearing a story, the left side connects with the right hemisphere. So they heard the data, the language is comprehended. And what happens is when someone hears a story in the motor cortex, they actually experience movement. So if someone's talking about being chased in a story, they can actually, there's been scans where it showed that this part of the brain lit up. So the person was actually experiencing some sort of movement. Then you have your emotions. Of course, that emotion is lit up when you connect with the story. That is evoked, and then emotional reactions like crying. If you're sad, crying happens. Also, it's been researched that you actually can smell things too. When somebody describes something quite vividly, or you remember something quite vividly, like the smell of the sea is a taste of childhood. So this links with memory, our experiences. So this is where science meets storytelling. So, not quite a break yet, beg your pardon. So in terms of seeing how these two parts relate, whether it's information and whether it is a storytelling brain, just these two examples, right? So this is the left. The compass indicated to him the direction was westbound. The road went up a slight hill. It was getting dark. Then this is when the man tripped and fell onto the ground and sprained his ankle. Storytelling brain. Harry knew he was heading west as he could see the dusty pink sun ducking behind the crests of the hill. He ran as night blanketed him. He didn't see the lazy rocks beneath his feet and tripped, falling indignantly. He howled in agony as he had twisted his ankle. If people care, they remember. Now, I'm just looking at the time and I'm looking like it's pretty good for time. So I think we'll carry on. Okay. So how can storytelling influence the body? Right. So we have, first of all, I wanted to distinguish between the mind and the brain. Now, the mind is a mental state. So this is where we have our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, our attitudes, and imagination. Whereas the brain is a body part that allows us to experience these mental states. So story can affect our physical and mental makeup. The neuroscience recognizes that story affects our physical and mental makeup at many levels, and it connects both sides of the brain, so the regions of the brain can harmonically play. And story has the ability to evoke and release the specific neurotransmitters that can cause tangible and intangible change to our thoughts, feelings, and actions. So our mental states are fully conscious or unconscious. We can have emotional reactions to situations without being aware of them and why we are reacting to them, like the triggers. And certain mental states have a physiology associated with it, and it could be positive and negative, and it can be felt in the body. This is because our brain releases neurotransmitters, including these three, which is the endorphins are the happy hormones, and oxytocin is associated with empathy, and the cortisol correlates to stress. Right, so the combination of these neurotransmitters has the listener searching for meaning in the story. And the process I go through is curiosity, like what's going to happen next? How does this story relate to me? Finding meaning in the story, really looking how it has happened in your life. And the listener connects with the protagonist. They actually become the protagonist. They root for the protagonist. They think like the protagonist. And they enter the story fully. They identify pieces within their own narratives. Okay, so what is stress? Stress is a physical reaction. So, for example, with a pain in the neck. Okay, so this differentiates between stressor, which are the events that cause the physical reaction. So you get fired from the job. So in essence, the stress, the physical reaction, is what happens in the body when you respond to the stresses, the event. Okay, it was her first pair of high heels. Now, guys, I'm really surprised. This is going faster than it was. So I will keep continuing. And I think this is going to finish quite quickly, but that's okay because then I can get some, we don't have a chat box. What I can do is I can get you to think through some of the situations where we can implement what we're learning in the science. Okay, so, okay, oh, right. Okay. This is another application to it. Right. It was her first pair of high heels. And they were Christian Louboutin. Stylish heel, curvature of the body, a craftsman's piece of art. Now, Louboutin, signature red sole, reflected that of her red lipstick. But her soul reflected that of the outer black leather. Surely these Louboutins will make me happy, said Olga as she put them on. Right, here goes her first step. wobble, 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 crash, and Olga falls hard. Now, not only was Olga an amateur high heel walker, she was a sheep. Yeah, I mean a sheep, as in Mary had a little lamb who grew up. And as we all know, sheep are rubbish in heels. So Olga got up, as usual. But as she got up, she had a reflective thought. She thought, not even these Christian Louboutins will make me happy. But she continued with life, wobbling in her high heels. One day, she had a particularly rough tumble. She fell hard on her head, rolled, and unraveled like a ball of wool. But this time was different. She didn't want to get up. She thought, not even these Christian Louboutins can make me happy. So nothing else will. What's the point? What's the point with life? And from that day, Olga had dark thoughts, just dark thoughts. She would lie awake at night, thinking of painful, hurtful situations, of how people have been rude and just bullied her. She became an insomniac, lying awake. She even started counting sheep so it can help her get to sleep. But when she nodded off, she'd wake herself up because it was her turn to jump. So again, she was alone in the dark. Nobody to love her. Nobody to love. Nobody to live for. Nothing to live for. So the next day, she decided. She took a rope and climbed up a very tall tree. Okay. So with knots in place, Olga jumped. But then she heard a twang and the rope snapped. But Olga thought, that's okay. The fall's going to do it. Not a problem. Thud. But her fall was cushioned by Hilton, a passerby. A man who was meticulously well dressed. Now Hilton was shocked and he asked in confusion, are you okay? And he looked up and saw the rope dangling down. And he said to Olga, you weren't, were you? And Olga put her head down, said in shame, yes. But I'm rubbish and I couldn't even make it work. I'm so stupid, hopeless. And Hilton said, I'll help you. And Olga was so surprised. She thought, he was just going to give me a sermon like everybody else, snap out of it. Come on, what is wrong with you? But Hilton loved helping people, loved it. Didn't matter what it was, he just loved helping people. So, Hilton's first plan. Now imagine this is an extreme wide shot. You have an overhanging cliff. There's a rope dangling down and it's frayed. And this massive, massive boulder is hanging off it, shadowing Olga underneath it. Now, here was Hilton, tennis racket in hand, bucket of Hilton was no Roger Federer, so he gave up. Then he thought, hang on, I have a plan B. I'm really good at cricket. Right, this is what I'm going to do. He set up a wicket. He tied a rope onto one of the stumps. It extended up into a guillotine, holding it up with Olga beneath it. Now, Hilton fancied himself as a terrific bowler. So, going to get this one right. So, cricket ball in hand. Bowl. 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 Didn't even come close. He thought, I'm not a Dodd Bradman. He gave up. And so it went down to plan C. Now that was the toilet brush and the wheelie bin, but that didn't work. Okay, next plan, it was a rattle and the knife, but that didn't work. But although those rattles are pretty lethal. So Hilton just thought, oh my God, I've let Olga down. I'm a high achiever. I should be able to do this. Olga, look, I tried my best. I am so sorry. So because he was a high achiever, he fell into this deep depression. He thought, I'm hopeless. I'm a failure. So he wouldn't get out of bed, wouldn't brush his teeth. And I don't know when the last time he had a shower. He just could not do anything. All his mind was flooded with dark thoughts. You idiot. You are a failure. Nobody likes you. They only like you because you helped them. And once you finish, you're rubbish. They throw you to the side. You are hopeless. You've been bullied all your life. You think you are clever. No, you were a failure. Stop it. So much pain. Stop it. I'd rather die. So he left his house with rope in hand. Now Olga was wondering where Hilton was. She really missed him. She actually had fun. She thought his creative solutions were amazing. But she did remember that he was quite depressed when he couldn't help her. And she decided to actually go to that tree, the park where they first met. So as she approached that tree, she saw someone lying on the ground. It was Hilton. He had a rope around his neck. So she started running fast as a sheep in Louboutins can run. But then she kicked them off and really revved it up. Got to Hilton, onto her knees, picked him up gently, saw the rope around his neck. But then she saw it had snapped. And it was familiar. It was her rope. And she spotted his rope coiled up under the tree. Then she thought, these make me happy. Forget about the Louboutins. This makes me happy because it means that Hilton wanted to live. He had that little spark in him. He had something to live for. Then she realized So do I. It was her aha moment. I have a purpose in life. And my purpose is to look after Hilton. And Hilton came too. And they hugged each other. They hugged each other. And they promised that they'd have each other's back for their lifetime, forever and ever and ever. But then a truck came out of nowhere and ran them over. I know I have a really weird sense of humor. Don't judge me. Now, I am seriously surprised. If you don't mind, I'm going to just double check that I've got everything spoken. Not only is, okay, let's see. Hang on a second. Okay, I think that's it. Oh my gosh, is this it? Sorry, I've just got to check it again. This has gone way too fast, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Okay. There you go. You can have a quick look again. Quick summary. Yay. Yes, 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 yes. Aha. Oh my gosh. That was it. But you know what? This is the reason why I thought it was going to be a 2-hour thing, right? It's because when I was doing all the research, there's so much, I'm not joking, so much research. So I pretty much condensed it, but I thought it was going to be like, actually, I thought it was going to be overtime. But this is great because you guys can digest it. And the very fact that you've been given the science and I've given a couple of stories. And I want you to right now to think through what neurotransmitters were actually released. Actually, it's neuro, isn't it? Neurotransmitters were released. What part of the story or what part of what you heard evoked a physical reaction? And whether or not you connected with me, whether you felt like there was that mirroring neurons happening, the coupling, and yeah, and think through whether or not you felt like you were in the story, and whether or not it actually brought you back to the dark times. Of course, it may not be the same situation, because I'm guessing that none of you are sheep, but what feelings did you feel for either Olga or Hilton? What memories did it take you back? What places do you not want to go to that story took you to? And what do you think you can do to process that? Like particularly with the information that I've been giving you, it's just so wonderful how science marries up with storytelling. I've been so blessed to be given the gift of storytelling. So everything I explained to you today was happening when I speak, in my mind, in my body, when I tell stories, but I didn't understand the science behind it. And understanding the science behind it actually enhances my storytelling, because I'd be able to create stories where it actually has the intention to evoke emotions, so it can be a process where people can use, and it's a very non-threatening way. When some of the films I've done, animations I've done, I love the technique because I tend to not do animations for kids or you know, ones that are fun. My animation always has some sort of meaning in it. And I love the technique of animation because what happens is people automatically think cartoons, kids. So what they do is as soon as they see an animation or the once upon a time thing, and immediately your body starts to bring down the barriers. So I have seen, excuse me, I have seen people watching my stories and feeling great. This is really funny. Yeah, this is good. And then bang, I hit them with a message. But by then, their barriers are down. You're actually able to reach them. So for me, storytelling is absolutely essential. I don't know if that's a word, but it's absolutely important, an important process to actually bring something out in a non-threatening way. And even it's unconscious. Like a lot of the things with, okay, for example, the mirroring neurons, we will do it. I mean, what I've taught you today isn't just confined to storytelling. It relates to other parts of your life. So basically, they did this research and they had a mother and a child, and they were watching the reactions, and it was mirroring coupling was happening. So basically, they found it wasn't the baby that was mirroring the mother, but it was the mother mirroring the baby. So it's quite incredible how a baby, a baby you wouldn't think had any intention, obviously. So it just reacted the way it did. So this is what I'm talking about, how there's the conscious and unconscious. And in terms of the mirroring, what happens with the brain, where what's happening in the storyteller's brain is being translated into the listener's brain, I feel that is very crucial, especially if you have a practice in coaching, that this is a way, it may not be storytelling like me, because when I spoke about storytelling, it included your personal narrative. And that's why this follow-up workshop that I'm going to do is going to implement everything that I've spoken into in terms of the science, because then you'll be able to apply that and what you've heard in terms of my storytelling technique. That's not something I'm sort of suggesting that you will do, but just to actually work out the patterns, what I've been doing in my stories, and then we translate it into somebody else's story where perhaps you can help them heal in their process. But in the same token, this is brilliant to help in your own personal narrative, your own process, because it certainly did work for me. So like, I am so surprised how short this is. But this is really good because this is going to help me in structuring the next course. And it's going to be different. Next time, it's definitely going to be a workshop. I really feel that I'm feeling the energy, and I really feel like there's so much you guys can give to each other in this. So yeah, so I'm really excited, and I'm happy. I'm happy to actually finish up at 11. But what I'd like you to do is I'm going to set up a survey that you'll be sent out to, where I'm going to ask you comments, questions, anything that you want to be able to discuss, or something that has been sparked in what I've shared that you'd like to know more of, because definitely there is a lot of information, and I could have gone really deep into it, but I didn't. So if you can actually keep that in mind, also as I guess your week progresses, you become aware of what's happening, what hormones are being released, what people say, maybe if there's a trigger, and then if you start to feel a physical reaction, stop and think, why am I feeling this way? What is it that person said or what they did that had created that surge of adrenaline? What was it? So yeah, I'd love for you guys to implement what you've heard. And I am going to love you and leave you, but I'll give you some details on the follow-up workshops. And also, I'm going to actually post this online, but I'm thinking perhaps keeping it up for 2 weeks. I have to decide because I'm trying to work out a structure, and I'd love for all of your input when we do meet for the follow-up webinar. And please bring anybody else that you think will be interested in this, because I will do a quick summary of what we learned in this one. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you and honor you for coming to this webinar, because the title, Healing Through Storytelling, says a lot. And you are invested in healing your own stories. So I thank you and I honor you. See you next time. Bye.